Hi, and welcome to Let's Get Lit. In today's video, we're going to go over Snow White and Rose Red, the classic Grimm's fairy tale that I don't think many of you have heard of. I know it was certainly a new one for me. Are you ready to dive into this story? Because let's begin. Alright, so this story starts off with a poor widow who lives in a lonely cottage in the woods. In front of her cottage is a garden, and in the garden there are 2 rose trees, one white and one red. The widow has also 2 children, one Snow White and the other Rose Red, to resemble the rose trees. These girls were beautiful, nice, and even-tempered. Rose Red was a little more adventurous and would go out into the woods to pick berries, flowers, and catch butterflies. Snow White usually stayed home and helped her mother with chores, or would read to her throughout the day. When the girls went out into the forest, no beast ever did them harm, and the mother usually never worried about them. One day they go into the forest and they begin to play, but they stayed too late in the forest and decided to lay themselves down near the moss, and they slept until morning. When they woke up, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up and looked kindly at them, but didn't say anything and left the forest. The girls realized that not too far away from them there was a precipice, and they're right on the edge of it. When they told their mother of this, the mother said that the child must have been an angel to watch over them. When the winter came, Snow White, Rose Red, and their mother were all inside around the hearth. The lamb was sleeping on the floor next to the fire, and a white dove was up in the corner sleeping as well. Suddenly there comes a knock on the door, and the mother thinks that it must be some traveler who's looking for some peace from the winter storm. Rose Red opens the door, and it's a giant black bear standing at the door. Everyone instantly gets frightened. The bear says not to worry and that he's not going to hurt anyone. He's just very cold and would like to come in and warm up by the fire. The mother obliges, and the bear goes and lies down by the fireplace. Soon everyone warms up to him and the children begin to play with him. In the morning, the kids and the bear go out and do their daily tasks. Night comes, and the bear comes by again and asks if he may sleep inside the house to escape the winter weather. This happens in a cycle until spring, when the bear states that he will no longer be able to stay in the house. Snow White asks the bear why this is, and the bear responds that the small dwarfs begin to mine during the springtime, and that whatever they get their hands on, it hardly ever sees the light of day again. Snow White was sorry to see him go, but as she unbolted the front door, the bear was hurrying out. However, he was caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hair was torn off, and it seemed that Snow White saw gold shining through it, but she wasn't quite sure about it. A short time afterwards, the mother sends the children into the forest to get firewood. While they're on their way, they see a small dwarf whose beard is caught in one of the trees. He scowls at them and starts to curse at them, but tells them what happened and how his beard got stuck. As hard as they tried to get the dwarf free from the tree, it was no use. Snow White then brings out a pair of scissors and cuts the very end of his beard. The dwarf is set free, but instead of thanking Snow White and Rose Red, the dwarf curses at them, picks up his bag of gold, and runs away without a second thought. It is a little while longer, and Snow White and Rose Red's mother asks the girls to go into the forest and get some fish for dinner. As they're making their way to the river for a fish, they see what looks like a large grasshopper, about to be pulled into the water, so they run up to it. They realize it's the same dwarf as before and looks at the scene at what's happened. Apparently the dwarf was fishing for food when his beard got caught with the fishing line, and the fish had mistakenly thought of this as food and tries to pull the dwarf under the water. Again, trying their hardest, Snow White and Rose Red helps the dwarf, and Snow White takes a pair of scissors again and cuts his beard, setting him free. Just like before, the dwarf does not thank them, but instead curses at them, picks up his bag of pearls, and runs away. A little while longer, still, Snow White and Rose Red's mother asks them to go out into town to buy needles and sewing thread and lace. While they're on their way, they see a large bird circling above the road where rocks had fallen, and were blocking their path. They realized this large bird had swooped down and was trying to pick up, guess who? The dwarf. Rose Red and Snow White help the dwarf and pull him back down out of the bird's clutches. And just like before, the dwarf decides to curse against them instead of thanking them. They took no heed to this, as the dwarf had done this many times. So they go into town and buy their things. On their way back, it's gotten quite late, and the dwarf has all of his jewels and gems out in the open, cleaning. Snow White and Rose Red saw how beautiful they looked and stopped to admire them. When the dwarf looked around and saw them, he began to curse at them and taunt them. When he was saying bad words to them, all of a sudden they all hear a low growling sound, and they look to see the black bear standing right behind them. The dwarf tried desperately to plead with the black bear to save his life, asking, "You can take my jewels and gemstones, whatever you would like, just please spare my life. Eat the girls instead of me. They are much fuller than I am." The bear takes no heed to his word, but gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and the dwarf did not move again. Rose Red and Snow White tried to run away, but the bear speaks and says to hold on, they shouldn't be afraid. The girls instantly knew the voice and stopped and waited for the bear. It was the same bear as before. Suddenly, his bare skin fell off, and there stood a handsome man clothed in all gold. He said that he is the king's son, and that he was bewitched by the wicked dwarf who had stolen his treasures. He said that he had to run about the forest as a savage bear until he was freed by the dwarf's death. Now, the dwarf had gotten his well-deserved punishment. He was now finally set free. Snow White ends up marrying this prince, and Rose Red ends up marrying his brother, and they divide the kingdom between them with all the great treasures the dwarf had gathered. The old mother lived peacefully and happy with her children for many years. She took the 2 rose trees with her whenever she moved, and they stood before her window and every year bore the most beautiful roses of red and white. This concludes the Grimm's classic fairy tale of Snow White and Rose Red. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever heard this version of the story, or if this was your first time. I hope you guys have a great day, and as always, stay lit.